What's the creepiest display of intelligence you've seen by another human? Story 1. I had to learn collegiate level German in the military, which was a 9-month class. We started off with 15 people and graduated with 6. It was really hard, and I barely made it through. The top kid in my class was a basic white kid from Indiana who had already tested out with top scores in Spanish and Portuguese in a matter of weeks. He not only knew those languages perfectly fluently, he could switch dialects fluently between places like the Spain or Brazil and Portugal. His story was the schools were scheduled for a specific length of time, with a report date already set that was kind of far out. So the Defense Language Institute, our school, kept throwing languages at him. He figured that out and started taking his time in class, but halfway through German, he turned in a science fiction book that he had written to our teachers, completely in German language. Then they put him in Arabic, then Farsi, which were each 1.5 year long schools on their own. So in the 9 months I was there to learn how to read, write, and speak German, which already had an expected high failure rate, he did the same for Spanish, Portuguese, German, Arabic, and Farsi, including different dialects, accents, and wrote a couple books. Before he came, he said he knew some Spanish from working construction after high school and liked the idea of becoming a linguist, but had never tried actually learning before. Besides languages, he seemed extremely normal, but no one knew he was writing books. We already had like 4 hours of homework every night. It was insane. Story 2. When I was in med school, I was tangentially friends with a guy who never showed up to uni at all, skipped all lectures, called in sick for all lab and tutorial sessions. The night before second year finals, he was around my house and said he had spent the last week watching every lecture at 2 times speed. Dude placed top 10 out of 300 students in every exam. And mind you, it wasn't just he remembered everything, but he had a functional, lateral, applicable knowledge of all the stuff we had to know much better than most people who actually showed up. I always shudder to think that if he applied himself, he would be a monster of a man. But dude was content to just chill. I went to university with someone like this. Everyone thought he was a jerk. He was actually just really intelligent, so I think much of life just bored him. He needed the stimulation. I actually got on okay with him. The two things I remember. First, his insane ability at the pool. He just could figure out the angles for multiple balls and bounces, and had the skill to hit the shot to cause what he could forecast. Secondly, one week before our end of year exams, he confessed that he had been to about 5 lectures that year and had never read any of the books or materials. He just said, I suppose I had better read some. He then spent a week in his room reading. He passed with the equivalent of a first. No idea what happened to him. Story 3. I once watched my cousin with Down syndrome just start hitting golf balls at the range like he was the course pro. He went to a few of my matches growing up, and occasionally I would take him to the range with me because he loved watching me hit them and riding in the cart if I played. One day he was messing with one of my wedges, and I offered him a couple of balls. By no means was he sending these hundreds of yards, considering it's a pitching wedge, but every shot was practically identical to the one before. He was consistently hitting them 80 yards within what seemed like a 5 yard grouping. Since then, I've tried to get him to hit more balls, but he just doesn't want to. By far the most unexpected thing I've witnessed. Story 4. I knew a guy who could remember everything he ever read, but that's not the creepy part. The creepy part was how he wouldn't tell you. So he didn't like telling people because it becomes a game for people. What is the fifth word of the second paragraph on page 93 for this book? So anyway, anyone knew? He just wouldn't tell them. Fair. Up until they pissed him off. Then it was like a court drama. On January 16th, 2007, you said that John and Jane were seen flirting at the coffee shop and, quote, OMG, John is cheating on Mary with Jane again. Looked through past messages and sure as crap the message would say that. Anyway, dude was super smart, but really jaded and depressed. Fell out of touch, so I don't know what he's doing now. Story 5. I used to go to school with a genius dude. He was super shy and introverted, but his ability to solve complex issues had everyone ask for his help, and he eventually became a super quiet leader in our classroom. He would correct teachers left and right, score perfect grades while everyone else was struggling. He photocopied his extremely clean notebook for everyone to use, solved the tests multiple times in multiple variations with errors, and passed it along the class for everyone to copy. did a few people's final project for a fee in addition to his own. He carried us all through the toughest classes, all while staying extremely humble about his intellectual skills. Finished every semester with near perfect grades. We all looked up to him. Story 6. I worked with someone briefly when I worked for the police. He came to my team to get frontline experience for promotion. He'd been in a secretive investigation unit before coming to us. I'll call him Dave. We went into this area with loads of gang violence, and we were enforcing a Section 60 stop for weapons after a nasty murder in the area. We stopped two men at the side of the street, and it was immediately obvious they had nothing to do with any of it. We chatted for a bit, and that was it, or so I thought. Dave, being incredibly polite and friendly, said to one of the men, "I think I know you." The man said that he didn't. He'd never been in trouble with the police, never been arrested, never got in any trouble whatsoever. He was in his 30s. Dave said, "I do know you. Let me have a look at you." The man was good-natured about it, even though I was feeling bloody awkward. "I've never been in any trouble," said the man. Dave looked at him and said, "I believe you haven't. Your dad did, though." He calls the man by his name, his date of birth, his old address, his mom's name and date of birth, and his dad's details, too. Dave says that 22 years previously, he'd attended at the bloke's house when he was a preteen because his parents were arguing and his dad was drunk. His dad was arrested for a minor sleep violation. He wasn't a regular criminal or anything like that. Dave had not only recognized the guy, but he'd done it from when he was a child, aged him, and remembered every bloody detail for a minor thing over 20 years previous. No wonder he was in the high-end investigation unit. Genius. Story 7. I'm not saying it was creepy, but my late friend Bruce could just learn anything on a whim. Languages, history, technology, you name it. He had been running science fiction conventions for 21 years, and when he stopped, he said, "I am going to become a CCIE. I heard they make a lot of money." Now, the CCIE certification is hard. Normally, it takes many years, thousands of dollars in courses, step programs, test exams, and then usually you have to fly out somewhere to take the exam. He just got some used books and got a CCNA, then a CCNP, then a CCSI within about 6 to 8 months. Out of knowing nothing about Cisco or modern computer networking, I just ended up becoming a Cisco certified instructor in less than a year. Then I went to get a CCIE. I believe, like most people, he failed the first time, but passed a second time. From zero to CCIE in 18 months. Companies paid top dollar for him. Some paid just to have him on their letterhead. His entire life was like that. Story 8. A friend once showed me his guidebook to how to handle his girlfriend. He'd taken notes on her likes and dislikes, what he'd given her, and precisely how she responded, which actions caused which responses in her, what phrases he could quote at her to yield particular responses, etc. And then sort of use the information he'd collected to write a little guide to expected outcomes of various things he does, so that he could defuse her if she got mad at him. If she felt unloved, he had strategies for fixing the situation so he could go back to doing whatever he likes while she gets off his back. If X, then Y will likely do Z unless P. It was somewhere between oddly sweet and creepily manipulative. Story 9. I used to know someone who would be pretty quiet around people he didn't know. Only give info when asked, and half of it. I guarded it until I got really close to him. What piqued my interest was when he said, "I don't like her. She's scary smart, but plays dumb." I dislike scary smart people like that. It's because he used to be manipulative when he was younger and admitted it while saying, "I'm not like that anymore." I noticed he was always watching and reading people. He'd know who you can tell things to and who you can't. He knows who has dated who and would read people's mannerisms. He would say things like, "He had trauma as a kid. That's why I was nice to him." He laughs after saying something, even if it's repeating what you say. It's as if he is trying to start laughter because he doesn't know how to make people genuinely laugh, but wants them to and doesn't know how to do that other than being funny or charismatic, and even unnecessary compliments like a personal hype guy. Common approval seeking traits for children who had bad family lives. That's why he talked to you about foster care, because he was probably in the system. And yeah, that dude was in the system. Called out so quickly. Your stepmom probably wants to run the family instead of your dad, because your dad works and she doesn't. and he doesn't want to constantly rein in the kids and grandkids. She wants some semblance of control because she doesn't work. She's a busybody with nothing to do but watch the news and send emails and texts all day. That's why she's judgmental, because she knows it's false control, but it's all she has. That was the best way to put my stepmom, a person he never met, because she's annoying ASF, and he only knew such a small amount of details about her because of what I had said to him. And he says this crap like it's common knowledge while drinking, as if it's all monotonous to him. Scares me to think about how he used to be manipulative. Story 10. Not creepy, but my high school algebra teacher apparently had the textbook memorized. We were doing work in class by ourselves and struggling with a problem. "What page and what problem number?" he asked. He then proceeded to write the problem out on the board without referencing the book. Blew our high school minds away. My thermodynamics and kinetics teacher would come into class every single day with a binder about 4 inches thick of his preparation for the class. He would start 1-1 whiteboard and just start deriving equations until he moved to the second, explaining each step as he did it. I saw him check those notes one single time the entire semester, and two people I know took the same class at various times and they never saw him check. It was pretty crazy how well he understood what he was teaching. Story 11. My husband and his dad. I've never met people who are just so capable of doing literally anything. Car broke, YouTube, got it fixed in 15 minutes. Plumbing messed up, consider it done. Need to rebuild your computer? Easy day. Want to build an entire house? Good. Can cook literally anything and does it for fun. I always tease my husband and tell him he's got a literal gift, the ability to learn and then apply that knowledge. One time I drove over the water line in our front line and he literally fixed it. It's just crazy what people are truly capable of. My husband is geospatial intelligence in the Marines and his dad is a STEM chemistry teacher. It's like a lot of the stuff isn't even a challenge. I'd like to think that I'm pretty smart, but some of the things they do is just like, wow. Story 12. Maybe not creepy in a conventional way, but blew my mind and convinced me he was a cyborg. I found myself working on intelligence while I was deployed to Afghanistan. New world to me. Never trained or worked in the field. I was an infantryman. I was the NCOIC, non-commissioned officer in charge, and worked with the OIC, officer in charge, Mike. Mike had this unnatural ability to recall random, obscure intelligence reports from months back. For example, say we got an immediate release report saying there was going to be some weapons and ammunition smuggled into our area. He could instantly recall several reports from way back that connected to the new report. No lie, his genius was so deep, it happened many times and led to many successful operations. The best part? Every single man and woman in our unit came home alive, and that was due in a very large part to his supernatural ability. I just feel lucky to have been involved and insanely proud and honored to be a part of that team with him, even if I always felt like a kid trying to play at the grown-ups table. Story 13. I was a kid in the 80s, and my dad's best friend who worked with him came over and saw me messing around with my Commodore 64. I showed him I was working on coding it to draw a line in BASIC. This was all new, and I was excited at the time. Ha ha, how technology has changed. And he goes, let me make a couple adjustments on the math, and sits down and in a few lines codes out a Mandelbrot fractal that grows and expands with overlapping fractals on my 16-color EGA monitor. This was years before I'd see something similar with Windows Line's screensaver. I know fractals are somewhat straightforward for those that know math, but to be able to sit down out of the blue and do this in a few minutes requires a level of skills and knowledge that blows me away, especially done as a one-off for a kid. It really inspired me. He was also the one that told me that the reason we haven't found extraterrestrial life is because of time, not space, like putting a person in New York and Florida and giving them 5 minutes to find each other. He spent his later years consulting for Apple, basically doing what he liked working on, and now is retired and long-haired, playing bass and guitar in lounges most evenings. Story 14. In real life, my sister hands down, and it's an ongoing thing. You remember that scene in The Matrix where Carrie-Anne Moss downloads helicopter flight knowledge into her brain? Watching my sister just go about her daily life is like a never-ending loop of that. dishwasher is broken? 10 literal minutes of YouTube later, she's got it figured out. The what, the how, the why. And it'll be fixed in half an hour if the parts are in stock at Lowe's. Car making a funny noise? Get her on FaceTime, pop the hood, crank the engine, and she's got it located and ID'd, and estimates from 3 local shops for you to pick from. Random archaeological discovery mentioned in passing on the daily MSN headlines. She read the journal article already. And isn't it interesting how that validates so-and-so's findings from his dig in Chile in the 80s? Since when do you know about fossils? Crazy complicated super esoteric recipe from Thailand she's never tried? I'll bet you $1,000 she'll glance at the recipe twice and whip out a version you could sell in a restaurant. She remembers your coworker's sister's boyfriend's birthday and that he really likes chocolate sprinkles, but not rainbow. She can get a feral dog eating out of her hand and get it to let her give it a bath and diagnose what's wrong with its back leg from 10 paces away. Hey, sis, do you happen to know anything about welding? How to preserve this old dress I found in my great grandma's attic? What should I do about these weird bugs on my tomato plant? Of course you do. Her bosses at work keep trying to move her up the chain, but she's not interested because it'll cut into her jam making time or something. But they all come to her first when there's a question or a problem they can't fix, and they listen on the first go. Her husband says he's seen her ask the general manager what flavor of stupid he ate for breakfast this morning, and seen him apologize for the error in judgment. She'll tell you she's not that smart. She just has a good memory. But I don't know, man. It's terribly handy to have her on my side. But if she ever decides to take over the world, we're all screwed. Story 15. Remembering people is a curse. I pretend to forget people I've met a while ago, or I can clearly tell they have forgotten me. When you go up to someone and say, "Hi, Jeff. We met at that barbecue 8 years ago when we both said the coleslaw was disgusting. Did you get that job?" They're actually more freaked out than flattered. My hairdresser's like, second time I ever went to see her was 6 to 9 months after the first. I walked in, and before I could say my name, I was a little early and it was busy. She came walking over, greeted me by name, and asked if I wanted my hair done the same way as last time. When I said yes, she proceeded to list in minute detail exactly how I'd asked for my hair to be cut last time. It was tied up at this point, so there was nothing to jog her memory, and asked if that was what I wanted her to do again. She also remembered I'd told her I sometimes wore clip-in extensions and asked if I was still using them, and if the haircut she'd given me before worked well with them. During the appointment, she also remembered the number, gender, and age of my children, details about my work situation, a bunch of other stuff I'd have only mentioned in passing on our only previous meeting many months and hundreds of customers. She remembered I was a fan of the local football team, asked if I was looking forward to a particularly big match that was coming up. She's not a football fan at all herself. Every time I go, I'm overawed by the tiny little details she can remember from our previous conversations. Funnily enough, though, she can never remember what side my parting was on a few minutes earlier. Story 16, it's when a kind of hyper-observant guy kind of read me like he knew me for years and years. Kind of creepy for me since I really don't like strangers knowing me since I like being private. I was at this casual get-together, chatting with random people, when this guy I'd never met before walked up and said, "You're a musician, aren't you?" I was caught off guard, but said, "I play the guitar." That's when it got weird. He smiled and said, "I figured. Your fingers are calloused in a way that only happens with string instruments, and it's been a long time since you've stopped because they've toughened evenly. And your posture? It gives away how much time you spend hunched over it." I just kind of stood there, stunned. I hadn't even been holding my hands in a way that would make the calluses obvious. The worst part? He said it so casually, like it was no big deal to read someone like a book. I made an excuse to leave the conversation, but for the rest of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd noticed way more about me than he let on. I still wonder how much he saw that he didn't say. Creepy. Story 17. I hang around some shady people. The one that took it for me was a hardcore addict with multiple chemical compounds. Around his house he had no business having. He said he made them all himself. I know my chemistry. And they were all legit what they were labeled as. He described how he made them, and it checked out. I've come to a point in my life where My philosophy is never to underestimate an addict. I've seen people at the bottom who are more intelligent in one or two things than I'd anticipate 90% of the global population. Story 18. My cousin is some kind of genius, like the kind of genius that doesn't know how to interact with humans. During a family dinner, the kids were sitting at the kids' table. We were all talking about kid stuff, games, TV shows, drama at school, sports, teasing each other. Someone decided to go around the table, and everyone shows their favorite video on the internet. Stuff like Vines, Reels, Shorts, etc. This dude gets his phone out and puts an hour-long brain surgery video in the middle of us eating lamb curry. A bunch of the younger kids start retching and crying and stuff, and he stops the video, but starts reciting the whole procedure that was wrong and what should have been done. All of it. Keep in mind, he was around 11 years old. The parents come to see what's wrong, and they're just so stunned they can't stop him. An uncle, who was a surgeon, later said that everything he said was technically right, but was still under research and not practiced yet. So no one knows how he knew all that. But my younger brother still doesn't eat lamb. Story 19. At my call hospital, we have this nurse that we call Dr. Bob. Anything that any nurse in the medical ICU doesn't know, we just ask Dr. Bob. When we do our rounds with the medical residents and they are not sure about anything on the patient's diagnosis, or what type of medication to give, or if it's compatible, they turn to Dr. Bob for answers. The attending doctors talk to him about patients and diseases like he was one of his colleagues. We often ask him why he is not a doctor, but he says he doesn't want to be on call at the time. He likes to disconnect and not be bothered. He likes to code, play around with AI, loves to 3D print stuff. He has a shop where he machine metal parts, etc. He likes photography and all the technical details. Very impressive and chill guy.